It wasn't until 2 months ago that I tried one of the Jackbox party packs for the first time. I'd played a bit of the You Don't Know Jack games, and while they were decent, I was never crazy about them. I was a little skeptical going into it, but as we started to play through a few of the more traditional games first, stuff like Quiplash and TKO, I found myself enjoying every moment. A few crude dick drawings later, and I'm hooked. We kept jumping around the available games until we finally switched over to a game I'd yet to ever play: Trivia Murder Party. Immediately, it began to distinguish itself from the games alongside it. First and foremost was its tone. All of the previous games were fairly generic with their visuals, with colorful but ultimately flavorless menus laid atop a muted background that has some kind of visual texturing, be they dots or a spiral or whatever. The whole ordeal would then be orchestrated by an announcer whose voice was overacted by someone with a non-regional dialect so perfect that he somehow managed to sound like everyone I had ever met, and no human actually living anywhere in the world. The fun and games carried on while all of its visual and audio elements just kind of faded into the background. All of it was functional, but forgettable. Trivia Murder Party was different. The title screen didn't contain any music, or in fact even a title. It feels Spartan and desolate. Once you hit play, a cinematic editor like a horror movie rolls before cold opening on a black screen with a distorted, ominous voice telling us to wake up before fading in on a dilapidated warehouse.
Come on, wake up! Wake up!
The obvious implication being that all of the players had been kidnapped and brought here to play this game against their will. Right off the bat, it has more going on than any of the games in terms of atmosphere. Whereas all the other games had been framed as playing for playing's sake, here, it was a fight for survival. It wasn't immediately game-changing, but it was enough to make me sit up and take notice. The game's next peculiarity would jump out at me the second the first trivia question arrived, and I discovered that all of the questions were unfair. By design. The overwhelming amount of trivia questions in this game would be difficult to find an answer to with access to Google, much less off the top of my head. Yet they're usually grounded in just enough common knowledge that you feel like you should know them. Things like, what are the free letters given in the bonus round of Wheel of Fortune, and at what age are people supposed to die in Logan's Run? It's not impossible, but they are always very deliberately obscure. The game very clearly wanted me to fail. It wanted me to get the question wrong. This sense of antagonism from the game was further driven home by what happened when I did get a question wrong, as happened upon my very first turn. I was thrown into a side game where I was nonchalantly asked to cut off one of my 4 digital fingers. No big deal, I figured. Probably just a bit of gallows humor to accompany the serial killer motif. I took off my pointer finger and the game carried on to the next question, where I promptly discovered that the first answer was unavailable to me. I had no finger to select it with. This threw me off balance, especially since on that question in particular, I knew the first answer was the correct one. I had no choice but to grit my teeth, pick wrong, and hope for my best in the death game. The losers were dragged into a room where we were then asked to pick a chalice to drink from while we crossed our fingers that we didn't receive the one containing poison. I managed to survive. One of my friends isn't so lucky. This continues on like this as one by one my friends are killed, and before long I find that I'm the last person standing, lack of finger be damned. As my last friend dies, I breathe a sigh of relief and I assume I've won the game. Then the voice told me that I still needed to escape. Somewhere under my breath I hiss the words, "Fuck me." I take my first turn and get both of the answers right. Then the second turn kicks in, and it's revealed that should the other players catch up to me, I die and they win. And one of them is right behind me. I tense up. I get the next question right, but so does my friend. Next turn, same result. Then I choke and get the answer partially wrong. My friend is one slip up behind me now. I put in the next answer. Wrong, but so is hers. Everyone else advances in on us. I get the next one right while most stay in place. I break away from the pack. I'm so close now. Then the darkness itself begins to enclose. I feel my breathing pick up as any slip up now will undo all I've worked for. The adrenaline kicks in. I need to focus to keep my thumb from shaking to make sure I pick the answers I actually want. I'm so close to the exit sign I can almost touch it. I get another question wrong. God damn it, it's right there. Please just let me reach it. Final question, and I have no idea what the answer is. I select randomly. I wait. Come on, do not fuck me on this. I deserve to be the survivor. Come on, please. I don't want to die. Please. Yes! I did it! Take that, you serial killer dick! I jump up in celebration. Everyone laughs at my over-eagerness, myself included. I feel the adrenaline start to drain out of me as I slow my breathing. All the tension and anxiety fall away, and it then begins to dawn on me. I had just felt fear. The same kind of fear that only games like Amnesia and Resident Evil alone had ever been able to provide. I had been well and truly afraid. And I was given that feeling by a trivia game. And it's managed to bring that out not just in me, but literally everyone I've ever seen play this game in a group. Every single time I've seen this game busted out at gatherings, it always ends with screams, panicked cursing, and sadistic laughing. It's so intense that I've had friends opt out of playing it because they simply did not have the emotional energy that they felt the game required. Watching a crowded room play this game looks exactly like watching a group playing Amnesia or viewing a classic slasher film. And again, I want to emphasize that all of this is coming from what is ultimately a simple trivia game. There's a million factors that went into drawing those feelings out of not just me, but everyone else. From the social competitive aspect, to the general gameplay loop of players systematically being removed from the game and the anxiety that that brings with it. However, the biggest contributing factor to this whole thing, without question, was its presentation. By framing its questions as life or death gambles and its losses as violent murders, it raises the stakes for every action the player can and will take so high that failure begins to not feel like an option anymore. And that's what inspires that sense of panic that seems to sink its claws into everyone I've seen play it. Trivia Murder Party could have simply been another trivia game. There's nothing about its core mechanics, the questions, the minigames, and the race to the finish that required it to be a horror game of any kind. It could have just as easily been yet another in the long line of enjoyable, but ultimately interchangeable trivia games that Jackbox Games has put out. However, by going out of their way to give some thought and polish to the elements that are so frequently considered afterthoughts in games of its genre, it was able to completely redefine itself and craft an experience that will not only stick with me, but continue to pull me back in again and again. It's reminded me of a simple lesson that we all know, but forget all too easily. When it comes to creating anything, everything matters. Even the frame.